Hi, Avantika. Thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm excited to be here.
Avantika, you work at Figma. That's awesome. A tool we use and love every day. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into Figma and working on the product team there?
Currently, I lead the product teams at Figma, working on our collaboration tools and native apps. For those who aren't familiar, Figma is a design tool that's aimed to democratize design, make it accessible to everyone. And I think like the collaboration teams are a really cool part of the company. It's our job to understand how we can bring in PMs, engineers, other stakeholders into the design process. So that's through features that help them communicate, things like comments or chat or audio, but also features that help keep the full team up to date on design work that's happening. So notifications, like our file browser product, integrations. But early on in my career after college, I got swayed by the allure of consulting. I started my career as a management consultant at McKinsey. I did that for a couple of years, but sort of knew that I wanted to do something in the tech industry after consulting. So I moved into a data science role at Google, and then ultimately broke into product management at a startup called Birchbox, which is a beauty subscription business. I really wanted to learn product management from some of the greats, and I knew like the best product network was in San Francisco. So I moved to SF to work at Pinterest in the product teams there. And then after that, ultimately landed this role at Figma, which is very exciting.
So let's dive into that because I know last time we had someone from Figma on, they were saying that correct me if I'm wrong here, I think the majority of users in Figma now aren't even designers. So let's talk about that, getting other users into that process early and often. I think depending on where your team is on the design maturity framework, maybe design's even still siloed, but why is it important and part of your product process to get everyone on the same page or at least in the same FigJam file?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think it leads to just better product solutions. I do feel like sometimes if you're in a very waterfall process, the PM writes the specs, we hand it to the designer, designer designs the thing, hands it to engineering. You lose some interesting perspectives along the way. Like I've had engineers in brainstorms early on give like some really, really great ideas because they just bring such a different perspective to it. I've had designers who have really helped me shape a PRD or a product requirements document in the right ways so that we're focusing on the right problems. And so I do genuinely think that bringing in those diverse perspectives earlier on leads to like this interesting debate, which often uncovers the best ideas. The second thing, I do think it contributes to trust. The downfall of the waterfall model is that it's just like a black box in each of these phases, and you want to give people visibility into the work that's happening. They trust you more if they know what's going on. They feel like you value their input. And so it really like cements that working relationship between PMs and designers. And then the third thing I'll say is just a little bit practical. Like I'm a PM after all. The worst thing you want is like to fall in love with this beautiful design solution and then realize you just can't build it. It's just not feasible or it's going to take forever.
Yeah.
So that's partly also why I think designers should be pulling engineers in and like really working with them to narrow down the solution space. Yeah, getting that input early is just more efficient in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about remote. I mean, Figma is a key part to remote designing these days, but also like as a PM, how are you running stand-ups and without making everyone exhausted?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just collaboration just is changing, and I
Yeah.
think the best companies are really adapting to the new way of work and not like pushing things to be like the way they used to be. And I think the first thing is just acknowledging like what are some things that are particularly hard when you're remote, and how can we address those? One thing we are pushing both within Figma and even in our product strategy is thinking about where we can embrace more asynchronous communication, like giving people time to react and work on their own time, giving them more flexibility and focus.
I love that.
Yeah, because we all know these like Zoom meetings just sap you of your energy and like they drain meetings just generally like block focus time.
What type of advice would you have for emerging PMs or designers or PMs that are looking to collaborate with designers?
Especially if you're a newer PM or newer designer earlier on in your career, just being intentional about how you're spending your time. I think one failure mode I've observed with newer folks in the industry is like, as PMs, like we have this tendency, we want to just fill the gaps, we want to do whatever is needed to make the team successful. We'll take the notes, we'll write the JIRA tickets, we'll, unblock design, unblock engineering. It's not always going to be feasible, particularly as you grow and you want to scale your impact. So, you know, definitely do that stuff. You want to build trust when you're earlier on, but after a point, you don't want to burn out. You want to make sure you can actually like spend your time in the most impactful way. And so just be intentional. Like I think PMs our superpowers are like, understanding user problems, writing those down, understanding product strategy. Like spend more of your time on that. Maybe other people can take the notes. Maybe other people can schedule the meetings. That probably isn't what you're being paid for. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing, for better or for worse, this is something I didn't do a great job of when I was earlier in my career, is just that visibility matters. I was an idealist when I started, and I thought, like, keep my head down, I'll just get the work done and it'll be rewarded, and I'll be successful just doing what I'm doing. But yeah, I think the truth is that the more you can make people aware, and do it authentically and do it with humility, but the more you can make people aware of the work you're doing and the impact of that work, the better. And this applies to designers too. Track the work you're doing, understand the impact it's having to the business and the metrics. Make sure you write that down, put that in your performance reviews. Like you have to, sell yourself a little bit in these roles as well. And then the third thing I'll say, I'm very passionate about this. I've taught some courses on conflict management myself. It's something I invested a lot of time learning. But you have to learn how to disagree effectively with your partners. Applies to engineering partners. It applies to your design partners. It applies to anybody you're really working with, regardless of your function. But don't be afraid of conflict. If it's done in the right way, it can actually really be an unlock to innovation and creativity.
I have a question about company size. Going from a Google to a Figma, what are some of the things you thought about, or I guess what were some of the assumptions and what turned out to be true about going from, a massive tech company to a smaller but quickly growing one?
I just love how tight our product team is. When I joined Figma, there was 10 PMs and we could all fit in a room and debate out our product strategy. And we were always just aligned in like what we're trying to get done, the outcome we want to drive, the vision that we had. So there was just a lot less like stakeholder alignment and like, you're stepping on my toes, or, our strategies are just going in different directions because we are just pretty well aligned and communicating quite regularly. I think at companies like Google and Pinterest, like, the PM meetings become all hands pretty much because there's so many people. And so there's a little bit more of that, stakeholder management to be done.
Avantika, as we wrap up here, any recommendations or advice or places you would point people for more information?
Yeah, well, I'll share some of my favorite books on product. I think the first one is really what gave me a lot more empathy into the design process and like definitely made me a better PM. It's a classic, like the design of everyday things. I have it on my desk where I work. So yeah, it's a great one for even if you're not a designer, you just want to understand like how to think like one and like design great products, whether it's physical or software. The second, I'll say Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, Richard Rumelt, one of my favorite books. I actually reread this going into planning cycles. I just think like a lot of things that people call strategy isn't strategy. It's just fluffy, or it's like, vision statements. This book does a really great job of distilling down, like, how do you create concrete strategies and really think about different ways to write that out. Yeah, and the third thing I'll just plug, Figma just released a collaboration report. So we did some research on product teams specifically and the behaviors of product teams that actually not just made them work better together, but led to better product outcomes. And so maybe I can send you that link, Alex, and you can put it into the show notes.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for those resources. They sound great. Avantika, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Alex. This was fun. Thank you for having me.